Hey there, have you ever opened Photoshop and thought, wow, where do I even start? You're not alone. It can feel like a lot at first, but don't worry. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through everything step by step. You'll learn how to set up your workspace, navigate all those tools and panels, work with layers and masks, and even do some basic photo editing. By the end, you'll feel confident and ready to start creating amazing designs and edits on your own. So grab a cup of coffee, follow along, and let's jump right in. Okay, let's launch Photoshop. After the splash, the first thing you will see is this welcome screen. And it's basically like a theater curtain, really. The whole show is behind this screen. So if you want to go directly to Photoshop, you can click on this Photoshop icon in the top left side of the screen. And if you want to go back to the home screen, just click on this home icon. Now on the home screen in the middle, you will see new features, which is changing all the time. And it is Adobe's way to keep users updated on what is going on and what's new, which is nice. If you want to see the full list of new features, you can click on this gift box icon right beside your profile picture. And there you can see the full list and learn more about them. It's awesome. But for now, let's go back to the welcome screen. And in here, you can either open a file or make a new file from scratch. If you have an image that you want to work on, you can open it using this open button over here, or you can drag and drop your file here to be opened in Photoshop. If you want to make a new file, which is like a blank canvas, you can click on this new file button. But for now, let's open an image and start from there. By the way, you can download the photo that I am using in this tutorial from a link in the description and practice alongside me, or you can use your own photo. To open our exercise photo, I'm going to click on this open button, select our image and hit open. Now we are inside Photoshop, but your workspace might be different from mine. And that's because Photoshop will allow you to customize your workspace based on your preferences. To change your workspace from the menu bar, go to Window, and under Workspace, you can see all those predefined workspaces to choose from. I simply put it on photography so that I have all the panels that are related to photography opened. Now, if you have changed the configuration of panels in a workspace and maybe closed some, you can always go back to Window, Workspace, and choose Reset that workspace to put everything back in place. Now, let's talk about different parts of Photoshop's interface and how to customize our workspace. First, at the top, we have the menu bar like any other software. Just have a look at the name of each menu. It will give you an idea of what that menu is about. Then inside Photoshop's window on the left side is the toolbar, which is home to more than 70 different tools. You can set your toolbar as one column or two column if you want by clicking on this little double arrow on the top. I personally like it to be double because I think it is easier to find the tools this way. But if I need more space, I can put it back to one column. As you can see, some tools have a small tiny triangle on the bottom right corner. That means that tool has some other tools underneath. To see those tools, you can left click on that tool and hold, or just right click on that. A drop down menu will open and give you the list of the tools to choose from. Like if I right click on this lasso tool, which is used for making selections, I can see that I have access to selection brush tool, polygonal lasso tool, and magnetic lasso tool. At the top section of Photoshop's window, just under the menu bar, we have the option bar, which changes based on the tool that you select. It gives you different options and settings related to the tool that you have chosen from the toolbar. Like if I select the brush tool, you can see that in the option bar, I have brush size and its hardness, its opacity, flow, and so on. Or if I choose the type tool, it will show me the font, style, font size, etc. So just keep that in mind that whatever you see here is a setting of the tool that you have selected. Next, on the right side of our workspace, we have panels or windows. Panels have a variety of different use cases. Some, like this histogram panel, give you info about your image, or like this adjustment panel, give you the ability to edit your images, change their exposure for example, or turn them into black and white. One of the most important panels in Photoshop is this layers panel, which is home to our layers. Every JPEG file you open by default has one layer, and it's called background, as you can see. But as you progress through your project, you will be making new layers for your edits, as this approach enables you to keep your edits separated from your background layer, which is super useful and gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility. I will talk about it in more detail later in the video. For now, let's see what else we have in our workspace. In the middle, we have our canvas, our image basically, that we will be working on. You can see that our image has a tab up here and it shows the file name, the zoom level, and its color mode. If you open another file, it will be opened in another tab right beside this one, and you can easily navigate between the files by clicking on each tab. Another element that's been added to Photoshop's interface recently is this little contextual taskbar. It is kind of smart, and it will give you the most relevant options based on what Photoshop thinks you might want to do next. Like if you are typing a text, it will give you options like font and font size, or if you are on the crop tool, it will give you generative expand and aspect ratio options. Although this tool can help beginners and casual users a lot, some experienced users might find it distracting, as they already know where the original place for these options are and used to do it that way. So if you find it distracting, you can either pin it to a fixed position so it will not move around by putting it in a place you like and clicking on this three-dot icon and choosing pin bar position. Or you can hide it altogether by going to the window menu and at the bottom click on contextual taskbar to disable it. Of course, you can enable it whenever you want in the same way. At the bottom of the interface, there is a narrow bar called the status bar, which gives you additional info like the zoom level and document dimensions. You can change the sort of data you want to see in this area by clicking on this little arrow and choosing another option like file size or layer count. For now, I'm going to put it back to document dimensions. Now, the really cool thing about Photoshop's workspace is that it is highly customizable. Wherever you see a drag handle, which is a horizontal or vertical line, that means you can move that part around. Like as you see on top of each panel group, when they are in collapse mode, we have a drag handle. On top of our toolbar, we have a drag handle, as well as on the left side of the option bar. You can also move any tab you can see in the interface, like the document tab or the panels tab when they are in expanded mode. All you need to do is left click on the drag handle or the tab area, hold and drag to move that part and make it float. To put them back, you need to click and hold the handle and drag them to the place you want them to snap. A blue highlight will show up and tell you where it will be snapped. I highly recommend practicing moving around all these interface elements and seeing the possibilities for yourself. If you closed any panel or if you were looking for one, you can always go to the window menu and open it from there. Or if you want to reset everything back to its original place, go to Window, Workspace, and choose Reset that workspace. Now that we are confident in how to move things around and where to find them if we closed any element, let's customize our workspace and save it under our name so that, for instance, if you're sharing the system with someone, you can always recall your workspace if they changed it. I'm going to close this top panel group by dragging it out and closing it by clicking on this small cross icon on the top left to save some space. Then I'm going to drag this properties panel to the right column because I like it to be open here. Then I have my layers panel at the bottom which is nice. I also like to put my toolbar into double column mode, which gives me a nostalgic feel of very old versions of Photoshop. Then I like the contextual taskbar to be open, but I'm going to pin it down here so it will stay there and not move around. Awesome. Now let's save the workspace by going to Window, Workspace, and choose New Workspace. Then I'm going to type in my name and check all these options and hit save. Now I have my workspace saved, and whenever I want to recall it, I can simply go to Window, Workspace, and there I have it. Cool. Now let's do some basic editing and talk about layers, adjustment layers, selections, and masks. The concept of layers in Photoshop is pretty basic and fundamental. Having multiple layers allows you to have your graphical elements separated so that if you want to edit one, you can do so without affecting other layers in your image. Let me show you how it works. You can see that in this image, we have one layer, the background layer. If I grab the brush tool from the toolbar and start painting something, it will paint directly into the background layer. Now, I cannot edit my drawing without affecting the background layer because they are in the same layer. If I grab the eraser tool and try to erase it, our image also will be erased. See? We don't have any flexibility. So let's undo what we have done and do it in another way. To undo, you can press Command Z on Mac, Control Z on PC, and undo one step at a time to where we start. This time, we are going to make a new layer. To do that, go to Layers panel and click on that small plus icon at the bottom. You can see that a new layer called Layer 1 has been added on top of our background layer. The checkerboard pattern you see on this new layer means it's empty and it's transparent. Now I'm going to make sure the new layer is selected and draw the same element using the brush tool. This time you can see that since it is on a separate layer, if I select the eraser tool and start erasing some parts, the background layer will not be affected. I can choose the Move tool from the toolbar and move this element around, rotate it, resize it, all without affecting the background. I can also change the opacity of this layer and make it see-through by using the opacity slider in the Layers panel. And if at some point I want to hide it altogether, I can go to the Layers panel and click on this eye icon right beside it. So this is the kind of flexibility that layers give us. Another thing about layers that you need to be aware of is their stack order in the Layers panel. So the layer that is on top in the Layers panel is actually on top of other layers in the canvas too. So for instance, if I make a new layer here and let's choose a different color and draw a triangle this time, you can see that this triangle is placed on top of the square. You can change their stack order by going to the Layers panel and drag the top layer and put it beneath the other layer. Now that the square layer is on top, you can see that it has been reflected in our canvas too. Again, these points are pretty basic, but it really helps you understand properly how layers work. Another point that I like to mention here is that you don't need to make new layers each time you want to add a graphical element. Some tools like the text tool or the gradient tool will make their own layers as soon as you click on the canvas to use them. First, let's delete these two layers that I made. To select both of them at the same time, you just need to select one of them and hold down Command on Mac, Control in PC, and click on the other one. Then you can drag them to the trash can icon and they're gone. Now, if you choose the text tool from the toolbar and click on the image, you see that it will create its own layer in the Layers panel and you don't need to worry about it. Or if you choose the gradient tool and drag a gradient on the canvas, again, it will create a separate layer for that. All I want to point out here is that some tools in Photoshop make their own layers automatically, Some others may need you to do that for them. Just be mindful of that. Now that we know some basics about layers, let's talk about adjustment layers and see how they work. The adjustment layers will enable you to edit your photos in a non-destructive way by adding an adjustment layer on top of your original image. You have a wide variety of different adjustment tools like changing brightness and contrast, changing exposure, hue and saturation, and many more. You can also have as many adjustment layers as you like, but for now, I'm going to start simple. I want to turn our color image into black and white, and then I'm going to mask out one of the flowers back to color. It's a cool effect that you have probably seen before, and it can be a great example for you to learn how adjustment layers and masking can work together to make creative effects in our photographs. To make a black and white adjustment layer, let's click on this black and white icon right here in the Adjustments panel. When you click on that, two things will happen. First, it will create a black and white adjustment layer in the Layers panel, and you can see that it has been placed on top of our background layer. If we turn that off, you can see that our background layer is intact, still in color. That is why we call it non-destructive editing. Our black and white effect is in a separate layer on top, which turns everything beneath it into black and white, and we can get back to our original image if we want to. Secondly, it will automatically open the Properties panel for that black and white adjustment layer that we just made. And here's the fun part. Using these sliders, you can assign a different shade of gray to each color group in your image. You can tell Photoshop how dark or light the reds in your image, for example, you want to be, or yellows, cyans, and greens, etc. To check the color distribution in our image, let's disable the black and white adjustment layer for a second and see what we have. You can see the flowers are mostly red and yellow. The stems and leaves are mostly green and cyan. Now we know which slider will target each part of our image. Let's turn our adjustment layer on again and start playing with these sliders a bit. You know that our eyes love contrast, right? So I want to create contrast between the background, which are the stems and leaves, and the foreground, which are the flowers, and help the flowers pop. I'm going to show you two extreme examples just to demonstrate how creative you can be with these sliders. I'm going to choose a dark shade of gray for both greens and cyans to make a nice dark shadow for the background of our flowers. Then I'm going to crank up the reds and yellows slider to give them a super light gray, almost pure white, which makes an extreme contrast in our image and grabs the viewer's attention. Awesome. Now let's do another variation and compare them to see which route we are going to take. I'm going to make another black and white adjustment layer so I can compare both versions. First, let's disable version 1, and then to make another black and white adjustment layer, you can either go back to the Adjustments panel, or you can click on this little black and white circle at the bottom of the Layers panel, which gives you the full list of adjustment layers. Same thing. I'm going to click on black and white, and this time let's put greens and cyans all the way to the right to make them as light as we can, and set the reds and yellows to the left to give them the darkest shade of gray that is possible. See, here is the before and here is the after. This could be another interesting black and white render of our color image. Pretty cool. So far, we talked about the importance of contrast in our black and white conversion, and we were trying to achieve that. Now, let's talk a bit about tonal range. So the idea is that when we want to convert our images from color to black and white, it's a good practice to consider having a balanced amount of dark shadows, mid-tone grays, and highlights to create a dynamic image. Again, Let's disable the adjustment layer that we just made and make another one to explore tonal range this time. The goal here is to have a somewhat balanced amount of shadows, midtone, and highlights. So first I'm going to make a nice deep shadow area for the background by sliding the cyan slider to the left, which targets the leaves mostly. Next, I want to move the green slider, and as you see, it mostly targets the stems. I want to choose a mid-tone dark gray for the stems. Then I'm going to choose a mid-tone light gray for the red areas on the petals. And finally, I'm going to crank up the yellows to make a nice highlight in those areas. Maybe a little bit of fine-tuning, and there we go. Here is the before and after. I really like this last one, since it has a nice contrast and also tonal range with a balanced amount of shadow, midtone, and highlights. You get the idea. Now I want to turn this flower in the middle back into color, and I'm going to use layer masks to do that. So let's talk about masks a bit. Layer masks are a non-destructive replacement for erasing. If you use the eraser tool and erase some areas in a layer, those erased pixels are gone forever, and the only way you can have them back is using undo, which is not good enough because you might have done a lot of work after erasing, and using undo means you need to go back and start all over again. With a layer mask, however, you can erase an area and have it back whenever you want. That's why it's called non-destructive. Let me show you how it works. You see this white rectangle on our adjustment layer? That's a layer mask that comes with any adjustment layer by default. But we can add a layer mask to any layer. I'm going to add a layer mask to our image layer to show you how it works. But first, let's disable the adjustment layer. Then select our image layer, and to add a layer mask, go to the bottom of the layers panel and click on this rectangle with a little hole in it. And there you go. Here is our layer mask. Now, make sure the mask is selected, then choose the brush tool from the toolbar. Click on foreground color and select black. You can erase any area of your image by painting with black. And if you want it back, you can paint with white. You can also paint with grays to make different levels of transparency based on how light or dark that gray is. So remember, in the world of mask, as they say, black conceals, white reveals, and grays will make different levels of transparency. The same idea works with an adjustment layer too. The only difference is that when you paint with black in an adjustment layer mask, you are erasing the effects of that adjustment layer and not any actual pixels. Using masks with adjustment layers is particularly powerful because you can control the intensity of the effects on different parts of your image and basically paint the effects wherever you want. Now, let's delete this layer mask we made by selecting it and pressing the delete key on the keyboard. You can also right-click on the mask and choose delete layer mask. Now, let's enable the black and white adjustment layer once again and select the mask. Painting with black on this mask simply means erasing or concealing the black and white effect and hence revealing the color version that is beneath this layer. We want to turn this flower in the middle to color, so we need to paint that area in black. Painting with the brush tool might not be accurate, so instead we are going to select this flower first and then fill the selected area with black color. So let's undo what we did by pressing Command Z on Mac, Control Z on PC. Then let's select the image layer and disable the adjustment layer to see the image better. Now go to the toolbar and right-click on the Object Selection tool to see other options, and select the Quick Selection tool from the list. This is an amazing tool with built-in AI features They help you select objects by recognizing the texture and the edges. You can use it like a brush and paint over the areas you want to select. You can set the brush size by clicking on this icon in the option bar and choosing an appropriate size based on the area you want to select. And also, you can set the hardness of the brush. Before starting to select the subject, I'm going to introduce you to two of the most essential shortcuts in Photoshop that you really need to use almost all the time. And they are zooming in and out on the image and panning the canvas around. You have the zoom tool and hand tool in the toolbar for zooming and panning, but we are not going to use them. The easiest way to zoom in and out in Photoshop is to hold down the Option key on Mac, the Alt key in PC, and turn the scroll wheel on your mouse. This way, you don't need to change the tool that you are working with, like in this case, the Quick Selection tool. If your mouse doesn't have a scroll wheel, you can use the keyboard shortcut Command plus and minus in Mac, Control plus and minus in PC to zoom in and out. The second shortcut that you will be using all the time is the panning tool shortcut, which is the spacebar on the keyboard. So instead of going to the toolbar and selecting the hand tool, you just need to hold down the spacebar and your tool will temporarily turn into the hand tool. Then while holding down the spacebar, you just need to hold down the left click and drag to pan around. So Option key and the scroll wheel on the mouse to zoom in and out, and a spacebar and left click and drag to pan around the canvas. Now let's zoom in on the flower we want to select and put it in the middle by using the spacebar and left click drag. Now let's start selecting it using the Quick Selection tool. Simply click and drag on the flower. And there we go. We want to add the stem and also the leaf. So we need to zoom in a bit, then make the brush smaller. We can go to the brush size icon in the option bar to change the brush size, or the better way is to use the left bracket and right bracket on the keyboard to make the brush smaller or larger. So I'm going to hit the left bracket a few times to make it smaller. Then I'm going to proceed with the selection either by dragging along the stem or just clicking on the stem. Sometimes it will go over the edges and select the areas that we don't want. So in those cases, we need to hold down the Option key in Mac, Alt key in PC, and you will see that the plus sign in the middle of the brush will turn into a minus, meaning that we are in a subtraction mode now. Easily remove those areas by clicking and dragging on those parts. After a bit of practice, you will see that to have the best selection, you need to constantly zoom in and out, and also change your brush size based on the area that you are working on. Okay, cool. I'm pretty happy with the selection now. So all I need to do is to enable the black and white adjustment layer once again and select its mask. Then I want to fill the selection area on the mask with black, which simply means that I don't want the black and white effect to be seen in this area that I selected. To do that, I will simply go to Edit and choose Fill, and then from the Contents drop-down menu, choose Black and hit OK. We just erased the black and white effect from that selected area. It's like poking a hole in the adjustment layer. So now we are seeing the layer below. Now let's adjust our mask a bit. Simply double click on the mask and you'll see that the Properties panel will pop up. And there you have density and feather of your mask. First, I want to add a bit of feather to my mask to soften the edges. And then I want to decrease the density, which is simply like letting the black and white effect be seen on the flower. And we can control the transparency amount using this density slider. To see it better, you can go to the mask itself and see what is happening there. Simply hold down Option key on Mac, Alt key in PC, and click on the mask. Now we are inside the mask. Changing feather will soften the edges, as you can see, and the density slider turns the black area to gray, which translates to letting some of the black and white effect be seen on the flower. Another thing I like to modify in the mask is the bottom part of the leaf, which is so abrupt. I like to make this smoother and more transitional. So all I need to do is to grab the brush tool, choose the white color, and decrease the opacity of the brush and start painting there to make a gradient effect. To go back to our image, simply click anywhere outside of the mask. Much better now. Let's add another adjustment layer, this time a photo filter. A photo filter will allow you to apply a single color effect on your image. You can choose the effect from this list, or you can set your own color using this color picker below. I would like to have a deep blue effect, so I'm going to choose deep blue from the drop-down menu, and then I'm going to set the density to around 90%. The only problem is that the photo filter affected the whole image, including our color flower, which doesn't look good. So we need to exclude that from the effect. We did it before in the black and white adjustment layer. So all we need to do is to copy and replace the layer mask from the black and white adjustment layer into this photo filter layer. It's super easy. Simply hold down the Option key in Mac, Alt key in PC, and drag the layer mask from the black and white adjustment layer into the photo filter layer. Photoshop gives you a warning saying, "Are you sure you want to replace the layer mask?" Yes, we are. And there we go. The photo filter is no longer affecting the flower. And finally, let's add a bit of vignette effect to our image. So a vignette is simply an effect that causes the outer edge of the image to become darker or lighter. It can be used to guide the viewer's eye toward your subject. I'm going to show you how you can create it using the exposure adjustment layer. To do that, from the Layers panel, click on the adjustment layers icon and choose exposure to create an exposure adjustment layer. Then go to the Properties panel and drag the exposure slider to the left towards minus values to make the image darker. Now, since we want this darkening effect only to be applied on the outer edge, we need to use the layer mask and exclude the middle part, which is our subject. We can do that by simply painting a black circle in the middle of our layer mask. So make sure the layer mask is selected, and then from the toolbar, right-click on the rectangular marquee tool to see the second option, which is the elliptical marquee tool. Select that and draw an ellipse or a circle in the middle. To make the vignette effect, you don't need to draw a perfect circle. You can make an ellipse, but if you want to draw a perfect circle, just hold down the Shift key and then drag. You will have a perfect circle now. To reposition it, simply go inside it and drag it to the center. Once again, check that the layer mask is active, and then go to Edit, choose Fill, and make sure the contents are set to black and hit OK. We just made a hole inside our exposure layer, so the darkening effect is now only affecting the areas around the circle. Now, move the mouse cursor outside the selected area and click once to deselect. The only problem is that the edge of the circle is very sharp, so we need to make it smoother. It's really simple. Make sure the mask is selected, and from the Properties panel, increase the feather slider to blur the edges. You can see the effects on the image itself, and also you can have an eye on the layer mask. You will see how increasing the feather will make the circle in the mask blurry. Super cool. Here's the before and here's the after. Awesome. Now let's save our file. We are doing it at the end, but it's a good practice to save the file as soon as you start working on it. First, we need to save the file with PSD format, which is Photoshop's format, so we keep our layers. This way, we can come back to our file later and continue our work. To save it under PSD format, simply go to File and hit Save or Save As, and make sure the format is set to Photoshop. Choose a name and address for the file and hit Save. The other option is to save the file in a single layer format, like JPEG. If you want to send the file for print or you want to use it on the web, this is probably the best option. So to save it with JPEG format, go to File and choose Export and Export As. Then in this window, set the format to JPEG and use the quality slider to determine the compression level. Like if you want the file to be printed, set it on the highest amount, like 7. But if you want to use it on the web or social media, for instance, you can lower the quality to 4, 5, or even lower. You can see the file size over here, so as you are decreasing the quality, the file size gets smaller. Then simply press Export and then choose a name and address and hit Save. Done. And there you have it. I hope this tutorial helped you feel more confident navigating Photoshop and using its powerful tools. Remember, the more you practice, the more second nature it will all become. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and share it with others who might benefit from it. And hey, if you're eager to learn more tips, tricks, and creative techniques, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification so you never miss an upload. Again, thanks so much for watching and see you in the next one.